2018, 2019, 2 or 3 markers actually of a dysfunctional mental immune system in society were at the highest ever. So it's not like this happened out of nothing. It was actually the perfect timing to implement the next level of indoctrination, and in 2020. So the time was ripe, because a large proportion of society has a dysfunctional mental immune system based on the fact that depression rates were never higher than recorded than before 1918, 1919, never ever. That the Alzheimer's disease, as a long-term consequence of a dysfunctional hippocampus, mental immune system, had the highest level ever recorded. And actually at the time I published a book in Germany, which became a national bestseller, called The Exhausted Brain, where I show that the chronic exhaustion of society is based on the dysfunction of the hippocampus. And I finished the book in summer 2020. And in my last strokes in my book, the last words I put in the book, I said, I predict that we will have a large increase in Alzheimer's and depression based on the COVID measures in 2020. And in fact, there was a paper published a few months after I published my book in fall 2020, that based on this high level of depression worldwide, and of course also in the United States, we had a 3-fold increase based on the measures in 2020, the first half year in the United States. In Germany, there is a poll from the German Alzheimer's Association, and they showed that in 2018 we had about 330,000 new cases of Alzheimer's and dementia in Germany, and we had a rise by 31% in 3 years. So in 2021 we had a 31% increase in the age group 65 plus. In the age group 65 minus, you usually don't have Alzheimer's. Only 1% of all cases. We had an increase from 1% cases below 65 to 25% below 65. That means we have an incredible an increase of Alzheimer's, an acceleration of the disease. So first of all, people were ripe for such a program. The mental immune system was down, and based on the measures, which essentially brought us from a lifestyle that is far away from natural to an even more unnatural lifestyle, enhanced all these pathologies.
So we were primed for this, but you're also then stating that potentially we've been somewhat poisoned for decades or years. I know in the United States we have great concerns about our food source, for example, like the chemical additives, the glyphosate, the pesticides, processed food.
Low magnesium.
I mean, yeah, that's, I think, a consequence. But there's so many problems with maybe our food and our water source. Do you believe it's possible that we've kind of been intentionally poisoned in some way that affects this inflammation?
Before 2020, I thought it's just an oversight or disinterest, because not taking care of the quality of food, of course, increases the money you make on food. You know, I mean, the less you have to take care of quality, the more money you can make. And but based on hindsight now, 2020, hindsight is 2020, and in this case, it's actually 2020 when I got the hindsight. I think there's more purpose behind that than we think of. Even things that I didn't even think of now come to mind. For example, everybody was forced to clean their hands with disinfectants all the time, but these disinfectants usually contain alcohol or something else that is flammable, and so there are substances in there which are inhibiting or protecting us that it easily combusts and burns. So and these substances were shown now to inhibit the function of the hippocampus, and it was shown that children who were most eager cleaning their hands and disinfecting their hands have now most problems in school, though the level of these chemicals in their bloodstream correlates with their inability to function in school. So is this on purpose? Is it not on purpose? I don't know. But everything points into the same direction. And the goal, all these things I cannot really say, okay, it's purpose, it's not purpose. It's very difficult to say. But what I know was done on purpose is putting the mRNA with the poisonous furin cleavage site intact into humans, even in children, and at the same time making propaganda against the natural protection like vitamin D. So if I put this together, I'm a scientist, but I let my readers be the judge or the jurors to judge for themselves. But I think it's quite obvious.
It is quite obvious, and you'd have to ignore a lot of clear facts. I mean, they're not hiding this anymore. The World Economic Forum and that leadership of like bureaucrats and technocrats, they're certainly in no way hiding their ultimate agenda. Like, it's in plain sight.
It's really amazing. For example, Macron, the president of France, they published, they just had a new law entering essentially the public, a new law, Article 4, which puts you under the risk of going to jail if you say anything against mRNA vaccines. So this is tough. I'm just living 20 miles away from France here, and usually I use my bicycle to ride over there because they have a nice landscape. But I have to be careful now in the future.
And it seems like they're attempting to have control of the food source and a number of other things that would certainly negatively affect our health. I want to know, in your opinion, what do you think is the final solution or the ultimate goal here for these bureaucrats and technocrats?
Well, the fear that is installed into humans, in the narratives, and this is where the indoctrination really takes place, is then if you shut down the production of these new nerve cells in the hippocampus, you not only shut down the mental immune system, make people more afraid, more acceptable to everything that you tell them, and of course reduce their curiosity and their ability to think, it also leads to the fact that everything that is information that is fear-mongered into your brain actually enters your brain, will be memorized, but on the cost of your prior memories. So you erase essentially the hard drive in a way, like you would erase the hard drive in a computer when you insert a new operating system. And this operating system is based on fear narratives. You already alluded to a few of them. These fear narratives are usually of global nature. So it's the global fear of a third world war based on Ukraine or Israel or whatever happens anywhere in the world. Right now, it's always like the fear of the war being global. Then, of course, the World Economic Forum in their risk reports talk about perma-pandemics. So perma-pandemics, so everlasting pandemics. Then, of course, you have the climate issue. You make CO2 the culprit, CO2, and then, of course, the culprit, if CO2 is the culprit, then humans are the major source of CO2, and they are the culprit. And so humanity itself needs to be saved by removing humanity. So, but these are all global issues. And if you are fear-mongered and indoctrinated well enough, then you realize, and that's what the next level of the narrative is. We already see that with the World Health Organization contracts, that at the end of the day, we need a global government. Only a global government can solve that. Not the United States for itself can solve it. Not Germany can solve it. Not a single country in the world can solve it. So we need a global government. And that's the final line. Once the global government is installed, then I think they have achieved their goal.
So here's my other question, and then I'm going to take another viewpoint on this, just as throwing it out as a theory. So during the whole COVID period, there was maybe 25% of the people that rejected it, that refused to get the vaccine. And what we're talking about is very scary, and the idea of a social operating system like that, to me, that's extremely scary. That's in itself putting fear
is that possibly to put that fear into the other 25% of the population that we're rejecting and going away, just to kind of balance out this fear response that we're all feeling in some capacity?
I think actually they are failing at the moment. I mean, my opinion is they are failing, and I hope that my work contributed a little bit to that. But of course, I'm not the only one. There are many people, you mentioned already a few, who started from begin on telling people what's wrong. They see now, many people see now, even though they don't want to believe it yet, but many start now to see that the vaccine, I actually wouldn't call it a vaccine because the vaccination was not the purpose, the mRNA genetic program, and I even wouldn't call it experimental because I'm pretty sure they knew exactly what they were doing. It's not experimental for them. It was experimental maybe from our point of view, but from their point of view, they knew exactly what they are up to, in my opinion. So I wouldn't call it experimental, and I wouldn't call it a vaccination. So the genetic modification of humans, let's call it this, rather what it is. I think it failed at the end because, and I really sincerely hope it has failed, because more and more people realize that a lot of harm was done to them, and that the 25% who didn't respond to the fear-mongering, who preserved their ability, are now becoming a larger group. They tend to tell others, okay, that I understand that you followed this narrative because you were under fear. You didn't get the right information to begin with, because that was, of course, the government made sure, and the media made sure that you only got this narrative and nothing else. The censorship was there. So I can understand that, because, to be perfectly honest, up to 2020, I actually believed in the CO2 narrative. Me personally, I changed a few chapters of previous books because, for example, I wrote a book called The Algae Oil Revolution, where I show that the lack of aquatic omega-3 fatty acids contribute to Alzheimer's, depression, and the lack of mental abilities in all societies. You have to assume we need an omega-3 index of 11%. It would be ideal. 2% is not, you cannot sustain life. And 4% is what you have in America at the moment, United States. So you are close to a level that is where life cannot be sustained. And we need a solution. The solution would be eat more fish, but there is not enough fish out there, and the fish is contaminated. So I wrote a book, it's called The Algae Oil Revolution, showing that. And actually calculated that if just Germany would produce the algae oil that is required for the whole world to raise the omega-3 index from the average of 5% to the 11%, which would be perfect for mental health, we would actually, the algae would essentially consume all the carbon dioxide that the German society is producing. So, and that in a side sentence, in an alternative, I said, and that would of course take care of the climate change. And meanwhile, I know that is wrong. So I changed that sentence. And so, from my point of view, since I'm not a physician, a physicist, and a climate specialist, the narrative about the CO2, I believed, because I didn't have an alternative to think about. Now, of course, with in hindsight again, 2020, I realized this whole discussion was one-sided, and I started to read other books and listen to other scientists, and now I have a completely different view. But I can understand that the narrative can take hold of you, that you don't question it if you're not a specialist. But now, I mean, having said that, what I just said, I think it's possible for people to change. I was able to change based on the climate narrative, and I hope that people are able to change on the medical narratives, and that we actually use the trauma that we have all suffered through in 2020, 2021, and still maybe, that we use this as our big chance to change something. Because, to be perfectly honest, even before 2020, the world was not okay. I mean, we had the highest depression rates, we had Alzheimer's on the rise, all these things show that the mental capacity of humanity was under attack. But now we know why it happened, how it happened, and now we can change it.
Dr. Nehls, I'm a clinical psychologist and I treat post-traumatic stress disorder. So I'm aware of the literature on how chronic stress and fear affects the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So within your book, and you're describing the impact of COVID and mRNA technology on the hippocampus and brain structure. How do we distinguish between the effect on the brain from COVID versus just chronic stress?
I think it's almost impossible, because chronic stress leads to the excretion of molecules by the nerve cells, hyperactive nerve cells, stressed nerve cells, which we call danger-associated molecular patterns, heat shock proteins and other molecules which should not be outside the nerve cell. If they are outside the nerve cell, it's kind of a brain damage caused by chronic stress. And besides that, chronic stress elevates steroid hormones, which are also harmful to the hippocampus. But this chronic stress leads of the cells leads to the activation of the immune cells by a receptor we call TLR4. And the same receptor is a receptor for the spike protein. So essentially both chronic stress and the spike protein all activate the same receptor on the same cells, causing neuroinflammation. And that's why the same remedy, which I was proposing already in my paper in 2016, to inhibit or to stop the inflammatory response to stress or to infection. We also know that chronic infection causes Alzheimer's. Exactly by this mechanism is by inhibiting the signal cascade from TLR4 to the activation of these pro-inflammatory cytokines in these cells, which shut down the hippocampus. So, and doing that is the signal molecule that I'm proposing is called GSK3 beta. Its natural inhibitor is lithium, and it's maybe no coincidence that, for example, in Europe, lithium in microdose, not in the therapeutic doses, which are also almost toxic doses that are used for bipolar disorder. This microdose lithium, which you get actually by over the counter in the United States. In Europe, you need actually a prescription from a physician. Imagine the microdose lithium, which is essential, the essential dose of lithium, which shuts down neuroinflammation and makes you more, actually activates neurogenesis in the hippocampus, the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus. This microdose lithium, which those you find usually in fish, for example, in fish from the ocean, that's actually, which I describe in my book, the algae oil revolution as the historical source of lithium for the development of the human brain in evolution. And it was a natural source for many, tens of thousands of years. And now it becomes a necessity. And if we have a lack of lithium in our brain, then we are more prone to neuroinflammation. And I can see lots of these results now that I started to propose that to the broad public. We see that we get a reduction in brain fog. We see a reduction in depression, and for example, children with anxiety disorders, or children with attention deficit disorders. I work very close with the pediatrician. He says it's like a miracle drug. And it's not even a drug. We just give the children the amount of lithium that would be natural to them if they were able to eat fish every day. So it's not like a drug. It's almost like remedying a deficiency. And if we remedy the deficiency, if you balance out the deficiency, children are suddenly able to attend school again, are able to sleep again, and the fear goes down. It's amazing. I mean, I'm writing a book about this right now. It's called Lithium for Life. And I think that's really important that people know that. And this is one of the things actually I see at the moment. I see a big chance in COVID to make people understand what is natural to us, what our mind, our brain, and our body needs, And if people understand that, then we will live all in a different world.
Yeah, you're bringing up something that came up in a previous conversation we had with Dr. James Greenblatt, and he talked about a study that had come out with the natural occurring lithium levels in our drinking water supply here in the United States. And it was maybe like a correlation study that was showing those levels and rates of depression. And there was a strong
Absolutely.
correlation.
This is
And
not
just-
only in the United States. There are about 20 such studies worldwide, in Japan and everywhere. And it's
I
not
think there's
only
another
depression
one.
rates, it's also Alzheimer's rate, it's also admission to mental hospital rates, it's heart attack rates, it's everything. I mean, we know it's essential for humans, but here comes the point. The World Health Organization, I checked it, says, yeah, it helps to reduce the suicide rates, it helps to reduce heart attacks. We know it's essential for rats and for goats and for animals, but we have no clue, they say in their paper, if it's essential for humans. And that's why we have this ridiculous situation that in Germany and in Europe, you actually need a prescription.
And just to distinguish between the two, so the natural occurring is the lithium orotate, and not what is pharmaceutically synthesized, which maybe people are more familiar with, which is the lithium carbonate.
Yeah, lithium carbonate is, I mean, I don't know if the lithium orotate is a natural source, because I don't know what kind of salt is the most common one in fish, which might be the most natural source. It's also not a lithium orotate if you have a certain water which comes from volcanic, springs or so.
Okay.
Lithia is, for example, one. Lithia is a fountain for a high level of lithium in the water. It's actually the spring that was the spring for 7-Up. That's why it's actually called 7-Up. I don't know if you know that.
No.
7 is the atomic number of lithium, and up means it upregulates the mood.
Interesting.
But it's not allowed to be in there anymore, I guess, as far as I know.
So which lithium are you recommending that people can get here in the United States that's over the counter?
The lithium that I recommend at the moment is lithium orotate.
Okay.
Merely for the fact that it appears from studies that there is a transport mechanism, particularly over the blood-brain barrier, because orotate is also important for the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus. So a lack of orotate actually leads also to depression and so forth. So and that's why these transporters exist, to pump essentially orotate into the brain, and lithium essentially goes piggybacked, so on the orotate into the brain. And it looks from studies as, for example, a mouse model on mania and manic depression, or manic mouse. And they show that you need only 1/10 of the amount of lithium if you pack it in orotate instead of acetate or whatever is used in the clinic. So it's really improving you need less to get more result. Let's put it this way.